Hello, and welcome to Wilaker, a Journeyers podcast. Hello. God damn it. Hello, and welcome to Wilaker, a Journeyers podcast. I'm Will Abels, and this is my story. Welcome to Chapter 1. If I sound slightly frustrated, it is because I am. I was trying to get all this recording done in San Francisco, and luckily the prologue went fine. But the at some point I was listening back on my Bose headphones, and then the mic switched over to recording from my headphones, so I have to redo this. But that's okay because nothing's done perfectly once, and so shout out Bose headphones. Just so you know, Bose, you're not the star of the show. All right. Thank you for your noise canceling on the flight. But my God. Anyway, welcome to Chapter 1 of Wilaker, a Journeyers podcast. We made it. We got here. If you didn't listen to the prologue, a little bit of a backstory. I'm comedian Will Abels, and on November 4th, 2024, I decided to get sober. By April of 2025, I was drinking again, and in between those two time frames, I put together a nationwide comedy tour from Portland, Maine to Portland, Oregon, with the bulk of it being through the Pacific Northwest and just driving around in my Subaru and doing shows. So by the time the tour came around, I wasn't just doing comedy, I was also navigating my first relapse while trying to go out and figure out who I was sober. So there was, which I didn't get to do at the time. So there's a lot happening. That's the backstory of it. I'm sober now. I'm coming up on 6 months, and I'm at this moment. I'm in a really cool position to be in because every day that I stay sober is the longest I've been sober since I was probably, I don't know, 19, 20. So yeah, I'm in a pretty cool position to be in right now, where every day is just one step further into uncharted waters of sobriety, and that's pretty awesome. So I'll take that. But yeah, so chapter 1, I'll be honest, it's a little all over the place because this is sort of the valley leading up to the mountain, right? So basically, I'm going to take us from getting sober to deciding to go and do the Experience Files tour and leading up to essentially my first relapse. And uh, it's funny because I relapsed in April, and then I did quit drinking again, and then went back to it in May. But I'll get to that because April is really when my brain was like, no, we're drinking. That's what's happening. So we'll say it started in April because it did start in April. But so I got sober on November 4th, 2024. That'll be its own chapter about what led to sobriety, but decided that was the day I was going to get sober. And the next day was the election. I don't know if you remember, but they were saying it was the most important election of our lifetime. And for me personally, it didn't go the way I wanted. And unless you're an actual Nazi, hopefully, if you're listening, it didn't go the way you wanted either. And if it did, and then you had regrets, that's okay too, I guess. But I digress. Look at me, using my words. But the whole point I'm bringing that up is, besides the fact that, I'm probably not going to have children now because of that election and bringing them into this world, which is ironic because this whole podcast is about how my interaction with other humans is what makes me tick, but whatever. Not all humans, I guess. Uh, but basically, I got sober on November 4th. The election's November 5th. I didn't take a break and stop doing comedy because that was one of the things I really didn't want to take any more breaks because I was tired of alcohol dictating when I could function as a human. So I kept my road dates, and by November 7th, I was in Florida doing shows. My show on November 7th was at a Krabby Dick's in Panama City Beach, and it was the kind of crowd you would imagine that would be at a Krabby Dick's, packed out. Everyone bombed. All the comics bombed. It was such a hard show. There was like four dudes there in American flag bandanas. They were like the whole thing sucked. So the next day, I was appreciative enough that they gave me a hotel. And I woke up, I went to an AA meeting because at that time I was in AA. I'm no longer in AA. This is not an anti-AA sobriety story or anything. I will say that if you are thinking about getting sober, I do recommend checking out the meetings. If they work for you, great. They weren't something for me. I did them for a few months. They gave me a great foundation in my sobriety journey, and there are still elements of it that I use today. But it was just something that just really didn't really take for me. But I have tons of friends in it. It works for them. I'm proud of them, and there's elements of it, like I said, that I still use. So anyway, I did this show at Krabby Dick's, and I just was like, God, this sucks. And I couldn't even drink. So that was making it even worse. So the next day, I went to an AA meeting on the beach. It was really cool. I talked to a bunch of people. And then I had my show in St. Andrews. And I had my AA book, and I went down to the water to read the first chapter of it. And I start reading the first chapter, really resonate with it. And I'm walking back through St. Andrews, getting ready to go to my show. And this day was, I was just like, I mean, the cravings were super high. I didn't really understand that you're supposed to like call people, stuff like that. And so I just sat by the water and I just watched a bunch of birds. Like an eagle flew over, an osprey flew over. You know, I'm checking Google to see what that means, you know, all these things. But then I had this moment and I was like, wow, you're going to remember all of this. And that is something that I always come back to when the cravings hit or I'm doubting myself is it's so nice to just remember everything because that's the kind of drinking I did was I wouldn't always black out but I would brown out and there would be certain things I just don't remember and just like you know you can have beautiful moments when you're drinking but you're not going to remember them as clearly as you do sober and so anyway I go down I read my book and I'm walking back and I walk by this couple, and the couple looks wild. They were just barbers. One was a barber, the other guy was her husband. The husband looked way wilder than the woman. The woman was just a barber and a tattoo artist. Are they homeless or are they artists? Who knows? So I'm walking by, and the guy just goes, "What you reading there?" Like, you know, kind of jokingly. And I went, "Oh, I'm reading my AA book," because I was just like, I'm gonna be blunt, and I was like, "Oh, I'm reading my AA book," and he goes, "Huh," and she goes, "Wow, that's a sign." And apparently they had just been talking about how he should go back to AA because the two of them were talking about whether they basically one of them was sober, the other one wasn't sober, and they had decided as a couple that they both either needed to be sober or they both needed to be not sober. Whatever, that's their own thing. But I took that as a sign. I was like, well, I need a haircut. So I went in, chatted with them for a while. They were a little wild, but she gave me a great haircut. And then I went and I did my show, and I did 20 minutes, and the show was fantastic. It was much more my audience, you know, educated people, I assume. But no, there was a great audience. But truthfully, that was one of the rare moments that doing comedy sober was fun. And you know, like I said, I went all the way through April before I started drinking again. And one of the reasons I kind of went back to drinking was just I wasn't enjoying comedy. I wasn't comfortable. I wasn't writing. My inspiration was very far and few between. And comedy and drinking was just so heavily linked. And I know a lot of artists and creative types this is a problem because you know most of my heroes are alcoholics. But the thing is, it's a hard split. They're either sober or they died, you know? And I understand that it brings out something in your brain where you really tap into it, especially early on. But I was getting to a point where it wasn't even tapping into the creative side of my brain. It was just turning my brain into mush. But this show was one of the very rare exceptions where I had a great time. And it was a nice little insight of being like, you can do this sober. And I know now that it just took some time. And I don't know. I'm thankful for that moment. So then I go back. I go to Pensacola. I'm with my brother, and I do a show there. And then I go back to Nashville. Now, the other thing with sobriety is, you know, a lot of people take breaks from their life or whatever it is, especially if they're creative. They don't go and they don't perform. I didn't get to take a break from anything. I went straight to driving for Uber. I went straight to driving for Lyft because I put myself in debt. I was in a lot of debt. I'm still in debt, but at least now the debt is coming from. It's weird. My career is everything I've always wanted it to be, and I am somehow poorer than I've ever been. Um, but that's just part of the game. And I didn't get a chance to take a break, so I was just trying to get out of debt. And I'm saying this now, and you're hearing this now, and I'm in debt, and I decide to put together a a 6 week tour, 4 weeks supporting myself on the road. This is probably I have done runs like this before. It never occurred to me that June as a comedian is the worst time to tour. It is the time that everyone is out. They don't want to be in a dark cellar listening to some guy talk about his dad. They don't want that. So and 2025 was like record low sales. So I didn't know any of this. I know this now. But I've done these runs before in the summer and I've always been like, "Oh man, it's kind of tough to get people into the show." Didn't think about that. And that is sort of my career in a nutshell is I have to fail to succeed. I always fail forward. I know that now. I'm already setting up my schedule for this summer. I'm not going on the road in June. I might if I get the right offer, if like the money is like, hey, we're paying you this no matter what, I'm going to go do it. But for the most part, I'm staying in Nashville for June and doing some personal stuff, just doing some local shows. I'm not going to go on the road. I didn't know that at the time. So I get sober. I keep doing comedy. I am navigating this new world. I am trying to get myself out of debt. And it just keeps, nothing's changing. Nothing's changing in my life. Like, yes, my relationships are getting better. Like, my relationship with my family was better. But it just, in my personal life, I am more stressed than I've ever been. And I don't know. So uh, not to skip around too much, but basically I get to March and I realize my life hasn't changed enough, and that's when I start getting the little voice in my head going, "Hey, I think we're going to start drinking again." But then let's go back. So I get to December. I'm coming up on about a month sober, and I decide that I'm going to start applying to shows that I've always wanted to do, but never have done. And if I remember correctly, the first show I booked was Last Best Comedy Club in Bozeman, Montana. And the way that came about, it might not have been December, it might have been January. But the way that came about, I remember I was watching one of my favorite dogs, Maverick. It's a husky. I remember I get a lot of work done at that house, and he's always a great companion to get work done. But I remember I was sitting there, and I remember being like, "Well, I'm sober now, so I can do anything. Like I can completely ignoring the fact that I have no money and I'm going to be in debt. I'm going into the holidays. Uh, January, February, March are the lowest. Like, there are no tourists in Nashville, so Uber is you make no money. You make like $500 to $600 less a week. So I'm like, let's go on the most expensive possible trip we can go on. But I reached out to Last Best Comedy Club. They seem, and they're very. I appreciate this, and this isn't a slight. But they were like, look, you don't have a draw, and we don't know you really. We've talked over the years, but we don't know you, so we can't have you headline because we don't know you. And so I look at the calendar and I see that my comedy buddy Adam Mamawala. Do yourself a favor, if you like good comedy, check out Adam. He is so funny. He's been doing it for a long time. Great comic. And I see my buddy Adam Mamawala is headlining at the end of May in Bozeman. So I text Adam and I said, "Hey, if I pitch featuring for you, would that be okay?" Adam's like, "Go for it." I reach out and they go, "We like this idea." So, a little back and forth. They get it approved by Adam again personally. And now I'm booked in Bozeman, Montana. And that was how I started putting together the Experience Files tour. It was with Bozeman. And so then I'm looking around and I'm like, all right, well, if I'm going to do Bozeman, I'm going to be up there. Well, maybe I'll just go over to Seattle. So then I hit up my friend Monica Nevi. Monica, again, fantastic comedian. I opened for her in St. Louis at Helium. We had a great weekend together. So much fun, such a funny comic. And I reached out to her and I'm like, hey, if I came to Seattle around this time, what do you got for me? She's like, well, I got Billy Wayne Davis headlining. Do you want to feature for him? Do I want to feature for one of the best comics working out there right now? Yeah, thank you. So that comes together. So then I'm like, well, if I'm going to be in Seattle, might as well go check out Portland, Oregon for the first time. And I was running a show at Buds and Brews, which is a bar that doesn't exist anymore. But I was running a show weekly. It was a terrible show. That was another thing is in terms of my income, it was a show that paid very well week in and week out. So I didn't care that it sucked. It was just income. And then that got canceled. So that was more, that was, that was a big chunk of change that also disappeared. Again, probably should have taken a break. Nope. I was like, I'm going to power through. So at some point, though, during that show, there was a comic from Portland, Oregon named Megan Otto who she brought like 15 friends or something to the show. It was like the only good show we had, truthfully. But I remember I know her, and I'm like, oh, well, I'm in Seattle. Why don't I reach out to her and see if she can set some stuff up? So helpful. She sets up the whole week for me. She introduces me to every show I got on while I was there. So now I'm like, well, if I'm all the way in Portland, might as well go to Boise. And so I reach out to I'm throwing a lot of names out there, but these are all great comics, and you should follow them and go see them. But my friend in Denver's name's Korey David. His name is Korey David, and Korey goes to Bend a lot. He goes that way a lot. So Korey helped me get a set up in Bend. So now I go from Portland to Bend, and then I'm going to go to Boise, figure out Boise, and then I honestly forget how Boise came about. But then from Boise to Denver, I know people in Denver, get some shows lined up in Denver. And then Kansas City, I know some people in Kansas City. I've done Kansas City over the years. And next thing I know, I got 4 weeks of shows lined up. And that's going to be the whole month of June, starting the end of May into June. And then I come back and let's see, you know? And I make this plan while I'm sober because in my mind, I'm like, this is a trip I need to go do sober. And the reason I need to do it sober is 2 years prior, an ex-girlfriend and I went out and did a very similar trip. And I didn't do any comedy that whole trip. And the trip, we ended up breaking up not long after it because, honestly, because I was drinking too much. And I went on this trip with her and just like if you have a drinking problem, you might understand this more than other people. But when you can't drink the way you want to drink, it's like it drives you nuts. It consumes you in a very different way. Like if you tell me I can't drink, all I want to do is drink. And if you just let me drink the way I want to drink, I might actually not drink as much. It's messed up. So another part of this trip was going out, doing shows in all these places that I had never performed before, which would be everything leading up to Denver. Denver I've done, Kansas City I've done, but everything prior to that I've never done before. And so part of it was just sort of this redemption arc of like, I can go do this sober, I can go out there, and I just wanted to consume myself in comedy again and have that be the only thing I was going to focus on and just go out and do it. So, I that trip came together not that quickly. It wasn't like I got that all done in a day. That took weeks, but it came together. Another little addition to that is I'm trying, to get in with certain clubs. So I reached out to Duckworth in Charlotte. My brother lived in Charlotte at the time. I thought, okay, I want to do some comedy there. I set up I forget who originally was supposed to headline, and I was supposed to feature for them. It ended up being Learn More Janasi, who's been on America's Got Talent. Great comic. I ended up working with him. I ended up hosting, actually. So that was the beginning of May. And I thought, okay, go down, do the shows, make some money, come back. And then I'm looking at Rory Scovel's calendar because this is my all-time favorite comic is Rory Scovel. You know, he's my favorite. When I recorded uh, Regrets of My Father, my first album, we went back that was that night? No, sorry, I'm mixing two stories together. Regrets of My Father, I was really having some doubts about this album, and I was listening to WTF, Mark Maron's WTF, and Rory was on it, and he just said something like, you always think it's going to be this one project that really makes it for you, but you never know. And and when I heard that, it calmed me down, and I was like, yeah, this isn't going to be my last project, so let's just go have fun with it. And it was one of the most fun. times I've ever had on stage was recording that. So this guy is just, he's always had these little echoes in my career. I remember the first time I saw him, I was brand new. I was in Boston and I was doing the comedy studio. And back then, to audition for the comedy studio, you had to go watch 3 shows and then audition. And on one of those shows, he was doing the Wilbur Theater, so he popped in to close that show out. And I remember watching him, and I was like, "Oh, I can't ever do what this guy does." He had a joke about like kidnapping grandmothers and only releasing the one that made the best cookie. I mean, it's just insanity. It's just insanity. So anyway, this guy has been a part of my career the entire time as someone I've just watched from afar, met once or twice, but didn't know. And so I'm looking at his calendar, and I see that he's in Portland, Maine. If you listen to the prologue, you know that in May of 2020, originally I was supposed to record my second album and potentially like tape my first special in Portland, Maine at Empire Comedy Club in May of 2020. That didn't happen, obviously. And so I see that he's there in May of 2025, and I'm like, and it's also coming up on my 1 year anniversary of getting into into the biggest car accident I've ever been in. I totaled a car by hitting a deer once. That wasn't that big a deal. I mean, it sucked, but everyone walked away fine. And then 8 months after that, I flipped my car, and very fortunately got to walk away from it with just a bruised rib. That was it. But it's still mentally, I didn't realize how much it affected me, and that is something that will come up in chapter 2. uh, but all these things were kind of lining up. And I looked at the calendar and I was like, it's going to be really tough to get up to Portland, Maine, come back and get out get out west. But then my brain went, no, but you're sober. You can do anything now. Disregarding the fact that I'm in debt, disregarding how expensive all this is, disregarding that comedy hasn't updated its pay scale since the 1980s. And so I reach out to Rory, and Rory's like, let me check, but that should be fine. So now everything's coming together. I'm going to go to Charlotte, see my family. We're going to we did a little trip down there. One of my best friends from home, Mike, he had just beaten cancer. He's going to come down for this trip. I'm going to go to Portland, Maine. I'm going to, have that full circle moment where I'm back. I'm back. Like the COVID days are behind me. The drinking days are behind me. Like I'm going to get to open for Rory Scovel, and then I'm going to go out on the road and I'm just going to crush. And while I'm on the road, I'm doing like, a couple of headlining spots. And the way I lined it up is the headlining spots would all pay for the next part of the tour. Because, really doing showcases, I'm not making much money. I also knew that I could drive for Uber Eats in all these towns. So I thought if I really get desperate, I can drive for Uber Eats. I had a plan. I had a plan to try and make money. That didn't happen. It just didn't happen. So everything's lined up, right? But then come March, I'm starting to think I don't really want to I don't really want to be an AA anymore. So I'm leaving that, and that's okay. Like truthfully, I I really think that sober is sober and everyone's on their own journey with it. It was just something that wasn't for me. But I leave that, and I am just I'm thinking, I'm really not doing the road much in March and April, and I'm really thinking to myself, like, I should be able to put money away. But I am in so much debt that every day I'm waking up and it's like I'm just floating around zero. And I start to lose my mind. Like I start losing my mind. And I'm not drinking, and I'm using this tour as like I got to get to the tour. I just got to get to the tour. And as I get closer, I'm starting to realize in a very real way, like, I don't know if I can get the money away for this. And I tried to stay positive, but my comedy's not really going the way I want it to. I'm really uncomfortable on stage. And this is another thing is they say you shouldn't date in your first year of sobriety. And I believe that now. But at the time I was like, I'm not going to not date, you know? And I was very lonely. I became very, very lonely, and I didn't feel comfortable in my own skin. So I didn't like really want to go on dates. So I get through March, the drinking bug is starting to kind of slip into my brain a little bit again. And I did go on a date, and the first thing she says is like, "Oh, so why are you sober?" And it wasn't like oh, is it okay? Like, it's like, oh, okay, you don't drink. Like most people I meet are just like, oh, okay, you don't drink. I don't drink, or I barely drink, whatever. And I'm an open book. I'm happy to talk about it. But just the way it was so judgmental. And she apologized. She was like, I'm sorry, that's personal. And I was like, no, no, it's fine. And I kind of gave the light version of why I don't drink. And went on the one date. Date was great, had a lot of fun, but you know, didn't see the person again. And I was like, oh, that's a bummer. I kind of like that person. And you start saying to yourself, well, can I not hang out with these people because I'm not drinking, because I'm not fun, right? Then I went on another date. Person was a straight up red flag. I'll just say that. For me personally. I'm sure for someone else they're great, but for me it was just red flag after red flag. But as a people pleaser, I just ignored it. And again, the first one of the first things they said, they were just like, "Wow, you just like so you don't do anything. You don't smoke weed, you don't drink, you don't do." And at the time, I wasn't touching any THC products because I thought that it would um, potentially make me drink. I don't. I dabble with it now. Some people can't do NA beers. Some people can't do mocktails. Mocktails, I don't mess with because it makes me want to drink liquor. But NA beers actually do kind of help me a little bit. And with THC drinks and edibles and stuff like that, I'll take them before I go to bed. I'm not really like it doesn't make me social. So if you are, this is just kind of to the people that are sort of dabbling in that world. It's to each their own. I really don't know. I know some people can't do it. It doesn't really affect me much, but anyway, back to the story. So this person is just like says this, and we hang out for a week, and I even said, and that was the first time I think I said, "Well, I don't drink, but I'm thinking about doing it again." And once I said that, it was like, "Oh, I'm gonna drink again." And so I was dog sitting, and it's the first week of April, and I did it. I just drank, and it wasn't a big deal. I was by myself, and it's funny because you feel so good when you're sober, and you get a couple months in, and you just feel so confident that you can drink again, and you ignore all the things that you did beforehand when you were drinking and what it made you feel like, and the chaos that it brings into your life. And you just go, oh, I can drink. I have control. Like it's a substance. Like how can you not control this? And so I drank. I just made myself a little martini. I watched a little HBO. Had a second martini. Slept like a rock. Woke up with a headache and was like, oh, okay. And then went about my day. Went back to driving for Uber. Blah blah blah. Then drank again that night. Then I hung out with this person again. We went out drinking. I was so self-conscious that I was drinking around this person. We didn't go out after that. Like it just the date was not fun. We both just mutually kind of ghosted each other. That's okay. It was perfectly fine. But after that date, then I'm waking up and I'm drinking a little bit earlier and a little bit earlier, and then on day 5 or day 6, I'm drinking all day, and I thought, oh, okay, I lost the plot. So the next day, I quit drinking again, and I said, okay, you can't drink. And what I probably should have done, I should have called somebody. I should have maybe gone back to a meeting, but I wanted to just navigate this on my own because I knew I was going to go out on the road, and a lot of this stuff I was going to have to navigate on my own. So I quit drinking again. A couple weeks go by, and I'm like, oh, I'm definitely gonna be drinking, and I just cannot get the money away for this goddamn trip. And I'm watching the calendar each day, it's ticking a little bit closer and a little bit closer, and I just can't get the money away. It doesn't matter how hard I work. It doesn't matter. It's just repetitive. It's so repetitive, and I start to lose my mind. So I go down, and I did tell my siblings I was drinking again. So we go to Charlotte. I'm not drinking when I'm there. I do the shows, and what they didn't know is I was sitting in the green room. I bring the comics up, and I'm sitting there just debating having a drink every day, nonstop. And it's just driving me crazy. I didn't want to do it in front of my siblings, so I didn't. And then I get back to Nashville, and I still didn't drink because I had the trip with Scovel coming up, and so I'm just desperate to get this money put away, and I'm dog sitting nonstop. I'm driving nonstop, and I get all the way to May 15th, and I fly to Portland, Maine. I feel good. and and I'm confident that I'm going to stay sober for this trip, right? Even though it's all like kind of floating in my head, like, oh, you're going to drink again, blah, blah, you're going to drink again. I was like, no, no, no. It's time to crush. You're about to feature for Rory Scovel, your hero. We're going to do this. And so I fly to Portland, and my friends I'm staying with, I mentioned Ovid. He's a college friend. He owns a couple restaurants in Portland, and I'll talk about that in a bit. But I fly in. They're both busy, so I have to kind of occupy myself. And I'm walking around Portland, Maine, and I love this town. And it's raining a little bit. It's kind of kind of wet out, kind of cold out. And as I'm walking around trying to find what to do, all of a sudden I'm just like, God, I need to drink a shipyard beer. And I don't know what, like, I don't know where that came from, but it just consumed me in a way I've never felt. Like, I was so overwhelmed, and I was like, I have to have a shipyard beer. And so I went to the nearest bar, and I sit down, and I thought I saw my friend Dylan, and I was like, why would Dylan look like a sea captain? He looked like the captain at the beginning of SpongeBob with the big beard. Like, that's how he looked, and I didn't recognize him, honestly. But then I was like, well, who else? I mean, it's got to be him. But I was on a mission, you know. But I tried to like fight the craving, so I buy an NA beer, and I get a lobster roll, and I'm eating a lobster roll, have the NA beer, and I'm like, okay, we can do this. You got this. You're good. And then I go back inside and I just order a beer. And I thought, shit, well, let's see what happens. And that's the end of chapter one. I hope that that I hope that that was enough interest to keep going. And I'm sorry that my brain kind of went all over the place on that one, because there's a bit of this that's going to be sort of therapy. Because you walk through it, and I'm in such a good place now that it's wild to go back and walk through all that, because that moment that I got that beer, everything from that moment onward uh, is the journey that brought me to this moment right now, which is the best I've ever been. It's the best I've ever felt. It's the happiest I've ever been. Yes, my finances are still jacked, but whatever. Like, you can't take money with you at the end of the day. So hopefully it shows up when it shows up. But like, yeah, okay. So that's chapter one of Wilaker. I hope it was worth the wait. I hope it was just as good as the original recording that I did and lost, thanks to Bose headphones. And that's it. Check back in next Wednesday. I'll have chapter two. And yeah, we'll be kicking it off in Portland, Maine, after having my first, not my first beer, but the beer that made me know that I was drinking again. All right. That's the end of chapter one. I'll see you at chapter two.